Please turn to page 331. In this video, we will walk through all the different pages for my organizers and charts and tools that will help you with your argumentative writing. This is my argument file folder, and I use this same file folder with these tools for stages 9 and 10. On the cover, I have my chant when I introduce what an argument is to the students. An argument is when I, the writer, research, choose, then write about a debatable issue. And then I have what research, choose, and write means. And we have that in our little chant there as a reminder about the process of what we go through when we write an opinion. Inside your file folder, you have a pocket for tools and a pocket for templates. The templates are the organizers I have students to use for their research and to write out their stage 9 and stage 10 arguments. For the tools, I suggest that you duplicate back-to-back pages 339 to pages 347. As you're teaching how to plan and write an argument, or when your students independently are planning and writing their arguments, they can turn to these different pages to help them with planning their arguments. We have our easy-to-use file folder for writing arguments at stages 9 and 10. Inside, we have our tools and we have our templates. First, we'll walk through the organizer section where we'll look at all the different organizers for you to use with stage 9 or stage 10 writing. On page 332, we have the steps for stage 9 writing, where we have our BA, paragraph 1, and paragraph 2, our tree. Here's our direction sheet for our students to use when they're filling out, and look on the facing page, their BAT tree, the BA and the tree, paragraph 1 and 2 of their 2-paragraph opinions. On pages 334 and 345 are the direction sheets for the stage 10 argumentative essay, and also the organizer for stage 10. This organizer could be duplicated for students to fill in, or you can have them make their own organizer, which I highly suggest. It's there just for those students that need that scaffolding. And the last 2 pages are the research pages. We have our for and we have our against research. Duplicate these back to back. When students are analyzing and evaluating their sources, they have this note-taking sheet for them to immediately flip to whether the source is for or against the argument, and then they can record the information. This is the first step you have to go through in an argument to find both sources that are for and against the argument, analyze and evaluate them before you choose a side. The next section is the tool section for argumentative writing. And these are pages 339 to 347. Duplicate these pages back to back, staple them together so that you have a resource toolkit just in a little booklet. Let's go through all the different pages for the tools of argumentative writing. The first page has debatable questions or topics. This page provides many examples for science, social studies, as well as just in the world common topics that are important to students. These are some starting points for you to use when you're trying to craft an argument for your class. On the facing page is their thesis statement, the big idea of their paper. In order to have the thesis statement, they're going to reread what the debatable topic was. So let's say that we had cell phones are a valuable educational tool. They're going back and rereading that argument. Then they need to use PIC. That's my anachronism for them to identify what kind of argument is this. P is policy, I is issue, and C is claim. What kind of argument is this? Is it a policy, a rule? Is it an issue, something that's happening? Is it a claim, something that you think is true? Cell phones are an educational tool, then I'm making a claim. Once I identify, and in this case that it was a claim, then I will go to the claim, and notice below I have 2 different ways that you can have a claim. Is this claim showing why something happened or why something is true? Oh, this is a claim where we're arguing why something is true, that cell phones are an educational tool. Then I can go and use my frame. Although many people may believe cell phones can cause problems in a school setting, actually they can be used as an educational tool. Once we use the frame and we develop that thesis statement, the argument, then we need to identify 3 reasons to support that argument. We already have those because we have already done the research. Let's look at the different types of arguments. The first is an argument could be a policy. I'm arguing for or against a policy or a rule. Typically, that's that problem solution type of thinking. Your thesis statement, being in that problem solution format, would be due to the, you're going to explain what the problem is, and then your proposed action. So here's your problem, your solution, and then you're going to say should be. Let's look at what we have. Due to the, and then here's our problem. Danger of car accidents. Here's our proposed action. Cell phones should be banned while driving. So there's our solution. And then we identify our reasons. How would the proposed action or policy solve the problem? So notice I'm asking that question to get to solutions that would make sense. This policy would decrease car accidents, distractions, and anxiety from stressful conversations. Let's go to the second type of argument. What if an argument is an issue or a value? You're arguing the value of something. You're either arguing that it is valuable or it isn't valuable, and you're using a pro or con type of thinking. Your theses would be you name the subject, you use the word is, and then you state your position. We have our example. Here's our subject. Fast food consumption is, and now state your position, the greatest health threat facing teens. There's an issue or value for my argument. What key reasons cause you to think or feel this way? That fast food is the greatest health threat. A higher number of students with weight gain, insulin resistance, and high blood pressure. The third is a claim. A claim could be cause and effect. And that's where we argue why an event happened or a condition changed. This is our cause. Our first part of our frame is our cause. And then the second part is the effect. And we're going to state the cause, and then we're going to state the effect. And we're going to use the word cause in the middle. So let's see what we mean by that. Here's our cause, volcanic eruptions. Here's the effect, climate change. So let's put it together. Volcanic eruptions are a major cause for climate change. Next, we want to come up with our 3 reasons that make sense, that are going to back up that argument. So what do we ask? What key actions, events, or issues caused the change, or were the effects of the change? And that way we get to the effects of change were the ozone effect, the greenhouse effect, and the haze effect. Let's go to the claim when we're contrasting in our thinking. Why are we contrasting? Because we're arguing why something is true or not true. So we're going to contrast in our thinking. Although many people may believe, and then you put the opposite of what you think is true, actually, and then you put what you think is true here. So we have, although most people believe tap water is safe, actually it is easily contaminated. This is a claim in which you're contrasting in your thinking in order to make the argument about whether something is true or not. And your argument statement is set up like a contrast statement. You're showing, although many people believe, here's the opposite, the contrast, and here's what you believe, this is what you think is true. Here's the question we asked to try to find reasons that are going to make sense and back up that argument. So we're going to ask, what key reasons cause you to think or feel this way? That tap water can easily be contaminated. Accidents, neglect, and natural disasters. On this page, I have the thinking process a student needs to walk through in order to form their arguments as well as come up with reasons that truly will back up their arguments. When you're asking these questions to identify reasons to back up your argument, always go back to your sources that you have analyzed and evaluated in your research. On the next page, we have analyze and evaluate sources. You have an argument, and what do you need to do? You're not jumping to conclusions. You need to look at sources that are for and against your argument. What do you do when you look at a source? It's that beginning step. Where do I go for a source? I can go to print, physical, or electronic sources. Once I have the source, I need to identify what kind of source it is. Is it primary, secondary, tertiary, or a combination of sources? I have those listed in boxes below for students to analyze what kind of source is it. And finally, I need to investigate my source for their qualifications and trustworthiness of the author, organization, or group from which that source was taken. And the qualifications, the questions I ask is, does the author, organization, or group have credentials, experience, or accomplishments to report about this subject? To also see if they're qualified, I ask, is the information current, accurate, and verifiable? For trustworthiness, I'm going to ask, does the author, organization, or group have a trustworthy, honest reputation? How do peers, the media, and the public judge their work? So this is the process that you go through to help analyze and evaluate a source. Well, let's look at the next page for convincing evidence. This page displays many types of evidence that can be convincing, can provide credible evidence. It doesn't mean that it's always credible. It's a chart to identify and give your students the vocabulary of different types of evidence to understand what a fact, statistic, definitions, quoted authorities, surveys, expert interviews, documents, and experiments. And there's many others, but these are pretty common types of evidence students will use to back up their reasons in their arguments. It's more of a reference sheet just to identify what is a quoted authority, a definition, a survey, just to know what those types of evidence are. Let's go to the next page. The next page is another chart, and this is misleading reasons in arguments. When students are providing a reason to back up their argument, sometimes that reason and or evidence that they're backing up their argument with may be misleading. I have a list of all types of misleading arguments. When my investigative teams are reading their sources of information and analyzing them, and then they come up to report to the class their source, my entire class keep this chart in front of them, or I display it up on the document viewer. When the students are presenting their reasons from their source that are for or against the argument and evidence that are for or against the argument, they can look at this chart to see if it's misleading. Let's say that my students are presenting a source and they say something like, well, everyone thinks that this is true. Everyone thinks this is right. Because when we were reading this article, they reported that everyone in the group thought that this was right. Your class can immediately say, bandwagon, bandwagon. Just because it's popular doesn't mean that you can use that in your argument. You can't claim that an argument is valid just because it's popular. When students are recording information that the different investigative groups are reporting out about their individual sources, your group is not only filling in that information, but they're listening and analyzing. And if they hear something that's misleading, they're going to identify what it is and give the definition to explain why it's misleading and we can't use it. This provides your students to be engaged. Just because I gave you a source that everything in there is valid. You have to read and judge that. And sometimes I'll whisper to a group to put something that is misleading. So when they report out, I want to check to see if the class can identify that it's a misleading reason. This is a fun way, an engaging way for your students to reach even more higher levels of thinking and analysis when they're analyzing and evaluating their sources. On the following page are transitions. So think of battery when you're looking at this transition for arguments. The A, these are different phrases or words that your students can use when they begin their argument statement. Down below, you'll also see these circles that label and identify the other parts of your argument, and that is the T and the R, the transition to the reason. And here's our E, our evidence, and explain the evidence. When we have our TR, these are just words and phrases that you can use to transition smoothly to the evidence. Our evidence here is what I want you to look at most especially, and that is when students are citing evidence, these are nice little templates they can use to pull that information in an academic way. This publication states, and then they can put in their quotes, that information that they pulled directly from that publication. According to, so if you want to say the person's full name that's an expert, their title and organization, you can put that in your phrase. According to John Smith, the president of Sailboats Forever, then you have in your quotations the direct information that you pulled from that source. Also, as, and then the author's full name and title, as John Smith, president of Sailors Forever, points out in the, and then the title of the publication. In Sailing to Adventure, and then you're putting in your quotations the direct information that you're pulling from your text. These templates serve themselves very well for your students when they're trying to present their information in an academic way. So they don't get wordy, they're concise, but they're also stating the group, organization, or the credibility of this source. And then below we have our explain words or phrases that you can use to begin your explanation of why your evidence supports your reason. Page 346 is our bibliographic citations. This is displayed so if students have to by hand write out their citations, this gives them the format as well as an example of what that should look like. I want to show you up here in the directions that probably one of the best things you can do for students is to show them how to go online. Here's a suggested site that you could go to where they record all the information they need depending on the source, and online they can create their bibliography for their paper. Technology is something that we want to show students how they can use it as a tool to aid them when, and in this case, writing their arguments. And when you talk about bibliographies and having to go back and find information, it becomes a burden. But when you have the website where you can actually plug in the information, they put it in the right alphabetical order, they manipulate it for you, that right there is probably one of the best tools that you can show children when it comes to citing their information. On the last page of my tools, these are phrases that students can use to begin their arguments. I always like to start off by saying, when you're hooking in a reader, you want to grab their attention. What would be best for my argument? Do I want to spark an emotion or my reader's curiosity to grab their attention? Then they can try to form their hook using some of these stems. They don't need to use these, but this is a nice starting point because these stems do lend themselves to arguments. These are all the different charts that make up my tools to aid you in your instruction as well as when your students independently write arguments. I hope you find these effective for you and your students find them valuable when writing arguments.